I have already voted by mail and checked, made sure that they received mine. This is the first year I've ever voted a straight ticket, which is blue. I made the mistake of voting for Trump last time because I could not make myself vote for Hillary. I realize that's a mistake now. And I have just been appalled. As a retired ICU ER nurse, I am appalled the way he has not only behaved, but the way that he's made no really attempt to control the coronavirus.
I'm Heather from Atlanta. My question for y'all is, when you're speaking to people, friends and family, who are so deceived by the information on Fox News and every Facebook conspiracy out there, how do you have a productive conversation when they discount your facts because they were gained from the mainstream media?
Hello, my name's Matt. I'm from Indianapolis. People need to know, if you turn over the Fox, they really think they're winning and going to win this election. So we need not to let up at all. We've got to really push this to the end.
It's Tuesday, October 27th, just 1 week from the election. And like Donald Trump getting interviewed by a woman, we literally can't even. Today is COVID Awareness Day on Vote for America, and we'll be talking with former Delaware GOP Chair Tom Ross, the Lincoln Project's own Zack, and a Lincoln voter who's putting country over party. And now our host, Lincoln Project co-founder Jennifer Horn.
And welcome to Vote for America on LPTV. Thank you so much for being with us today. As always, I'm so glad that you can join us. So let's start with the important stuff. As you can see, we are indeed back in the studio. It will be here for the rest of this week and for part of next week as well. And just to reassure everyone, we so appreciate your concern. We are all living in kind of a bubble here together as we produce the show. We are very careful and take all the necessary COVID precautions. Everybody in the studio wears a mask at all times unless they're sitting right here at this desk. You see I have my mask. I wear it, and if I get up and walk away, I put it on my face. We're all very good about taking care of each other and making sure we're protecting each other. I hope that you are doing the same as you go out and about in the world as well. And also, let's start the show, like we always do, with a couple of important reminders for you. Election Day is exactly a week away, and we are down to just one state left, Connecticut. This is your registration deadline. This is it. You've got to get registered. If you are not registered yet, get to vote.org, find out where and how you can get registered now so that you will be able to vote. And as far as where can you vote, I believe at this point, every state has their absentee ballot voting. Your absentee ballots can be going in. And most of the states, any state that allows early voting, it's up and running at this point as well. So go to vote.org. You can learn everything you need to know about when, where, how to vote in your state. It's really important that your voice is heard in this election, as we've been talking about here for so long. We've come down to it. We're in the final stretch now. We don't want anyone to miss the opportunity to make their voice heard. So vote.org. Find out when, where, how you can vote in your state. Now, my friend Lisa is not going to be able to join us today, unfortunately. So you guys are sort of stuck with me for most of the show. I'm going to do the best I can. I depend on Lisa for an awful lot, but I'm really happy that that you all are with us at least. And so let's just talk for a minute. Usually we spend a couple of minutes at the top. Lisa tells us what's on her mind. I want to talk to you a little bit about what's on my mind today. We're going to be focusing a little bit on the coronavirus today, on the pandemic. And if you've been watching the news as much as I have been lately, then you've probably seen some of this already as well. Over the last several weeks, continuing as we go forward, in spite of the fact that the president keeps telling us that the end is in sight, that the end is near on this pandemic, and they keep saying we're turning the corner. It's we're just around the corner. That's not the case at all. In fact, we know that the infections are on the rise in the majority of the states in our country right now. There are 36 states, I believe, where we know that the infection rates and hospitalizations are on the rise across the country, which is another record for we've hit another record for average new cases. And just as importantly, we see that not only is there a rise in infection rates of 40%, unfortunately, in the last couple of weeks, there's also been an increase of 14% in lives lost to the coronavirus. Over 8.7 million cases have been diagnosed in our country since this all started. Over 225,000 Americans have lost their lives to this pandemic. And the reason it's so important, we keep coming back to talk about it over and over again, is twofold, at least in my mind. The first is that it was so avoidable. It was so avoidable. The President of the United States knew long before any of us knew what was going on, how contagious it was, how dangerous it was, how deadly it could be. We know it. He is on tape saying it. And yet he made conscious decisions that put all of us, every one of our family members in harm's way. It was so avoidable. And of course, it's important because it's just so painful. It's such a horrible loss for us to bear as individuals who have lost loved ones, but also as a nation. And, Joe Biden talks a lot about wanting to restore the soul of America. Whenever I think about the impact that these losses have had on our country, what I think about is that I feel like it's like our heart is broken. We've lost so many people that we love in such a short period of time. And I think that this is an issue and this is a loss that is really influencing the way people are looking at this election and really influencing their vote this year. So when we see those numbers going up, the 14% increase in the last 2 weeks of people who have lost their lives to the coronavirus, it tells us that the president is still lying to us, still not being honest, trying to convince us that there's going to be a vaccine any day now. Remember when he said, even before the election, well, the election's next week. We're nowhere near having a vaccine. And we're continuing to see those graphs spike. We're continuing to see those losses spike. So we have to be honest with ourselves when we're talking about this, what it means, where it came from, who's really to blame. As we approach election day and you're talking to those folks out there who might still be a little undecided, I hope to share that information with them and talk to them from your heart about what this loss has meant to our nation. And that's a good point for us to segue to our first guest. I'm really happy to have our next guest with us. She's a Lincoln voter, and of course, Lincoln voters are near and dear to my heart here at the Lincoln Project. She's also a former Republican state representative from Arizona. She's been involved with politics for many years, and in spite of her long history of working with the Republican Party, she is now going to be supporting Joe Biden. Please welcome Robin Shaw to Vote for America. Robin, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you with me. So, Robin, like me, you've spent most of your life advocating for Republicans and advancing Republican policies, and not just running yourself as a Republican, but helping others get elected. But you've decided that you're going to vote for Joe Biden this year. And I believe, if I remember correctly, you voted for Donald Trump in 2016. You said reluctantly. What was the point that made you say, I just can't do it again?
Yeah. It's a great question. Trump was not my first choice, but I had declared right from the start there have to be some other family beside a Trump or beside a Bush or a Clinton to lead this country. And so when Trump got the nominee, I listened to him. Being from Arizona, I really didn't know that much about him. I knew he was a businessman, and I knew that he talked about draining the swamp. And having been a lobbyist in D.C., I saw firsthand the gridlock between the Republicans and the Democrats. And I thought, hey, here's a guy who's a businessman. He's from outside the Beltway. Maybe he'll be independent minded. And, worst case, he's a one-term president. And how bad can it be, right? Well, it was the biggest mistake I ever made. And I've lived to regret that. And that's the reason why I've stepped forward to work very hard on defeating him now. I think
so. Yeah. Robbie, before you go on, what was that moment? What was that moment?
So that moment
that made you say,
came very early for me. It was when he took office and he chose Steve Bannon as his advisor, as primary advisor. And I thought, here's a man, he's racist, he's anti-Semitic, and he's a poster child for misogyny. And at that point, I knew I had made a mistake.
I can totally relate to that. I think there are so many women across the country probably had that similar response to it. So, as you're pretty well respected. You're well known across Arizona. You've been a Republican leader. How have people responded since you've become so involved? And have you been able to kind of make the case and bring other Republicans along with you?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's hard being a Republican in Arizona and jumping ship to support the Democratic nominee for president. But it has been an overwhelming experience of having like-minded Republicans supporting this position. We just see how Donald Trump and his sycophants that support him just destroying the values of the Republican Party, the values that the Republican Party was founded on. And I think that we are fed up, especially women.
Speaking of especially women, that is a great segue for my next question. We've been talking a lot about how the pandemic has impacted women in particular, how it's really influenced the vote of so many Americans. And I know your mom has had some struggles during this pandemic, and and you're responsible in part for caring for your mom. Would you like to share some of that with our viewers?
Yeah, I can actually share an interesting story that happened to us, and we're one of the lucky ones. But my mom's 95, my dad is 99. They've been married for over 65 years, and they're very healthy. They're active. They swim. They walk. They're not typical elders. However, mom experienced a stroke this summer, and she was experiencing some symptoms, and they appeared to be a stroke. So I called the doctor. She was confused and she was having trouble speaking. So I called the doctor, and he said, get her over to have an MRI. And so we immediately took her over to radiology, um, and while she was in having the exam, they came running out saying she's in an active stroke. We need to take her over to the emergency room across the street to the hospital. And so I immediately called her doctor and I said, we're headed over to the emergency room. Do you want to meet us over there? And he said, no, no, no. Do not take your mom to the emergency room. Number one, she's in the demographic that is likely to die. I mean, that's just the demographic that's not going to make it. Secondly,
Wow.
that she'll probably never come out. And worse than that is that your dad, no one will be able to go in with her. She'll be alone. She'll be scared. She'll be confused. He said, take her home. We will manage her from home. And so we did physical therapy, occupational
Wow.
therapy, speech therapy, meds, everything. He managed her from home rather than taking a 95-year-old woman to an emergency room in the middle of a pandemic.
And that, I love that you were willing to share that story. We had similar experience with my mom, unfortunately, early this year when she was ill also, not quite as old as your mom. But the degree to which this pandemic has impacted our ability
Yeah,
to get the appropriate health care, to take care of people. Uh, and we've heard so many stories, people seeking cancer treatment, elderly
right.
people in nursing homes, your mom not being able to get to the emergency room when she needed to be. It has impacted people so heavily in ways that is even outside of just whether or not someone has caught the virus itself.
Absolutely.
So, Robbie, talk to me a little bit about yeah. So, talk to me a little bit about your experiences, um, living in the pandemic and the way that it's impacted your life directly, even beyond what happened to your mom.
Well, I mean, I don't even know where to start, really, Jennifer. First off, I personally know 3 people who have died from coronavirus. Um, Untold numbers, really dozens of people that I know have contracted it, and it's heartbreaking. Arizona was hit very, very hard, and it's really absolutely to Trump's failure to have a coordinated and federal plan to control this coronavirus and its economic fallout. And I believe that that is driving moderates and independents and even some conservatives away from the Republican Party, but especially women. Women are hurting. We're exhausted, and economically, women and minorities are harder hit, as we know. Um, there's just an unprecedented lack of leadership at the White House, and it there's no reason for it. In World War II, this country turned out locally built fighter planes on a daily basis, and somehow we couldn't manage to produce paper masks and cotton swabs that are essential for mitigating this disease. It's and as you mentioned, the fact that he's still in denial about it. It's frightening.
Right.
One thing I can tell you
And
about
we know,
Arizona,
I was
16%.
just going to say, we know that what you're talking about goes directly to the president's mismanagement as well, the lack of supplies. When he put his son-in-law Jared Kushner in charge of some of the response, and
Right.
and that we know that they made intentional decisions to withhold some of that federal help from states that were led by Democratic governors and thinking that they could manipulate this in a political way. It's just such a despicable disregard for human life. Robbie, I'm going to give you 15 seconds. I know we have a lot of people in Arizona who are watching right now, Republicans who are undecided. They know who you are. They're going to pay attention to what you say. What do you say to those Republicans who are this close and we just need to win them over before next Tuesday?
I can speak to Arizona. 16% of Republican women broke with the party to vote for Kirsten Sinema for the U.S. Senate seat against Martha McSally. And that says something about women's sensibilities and about where Arizona is headed in the future. Trump nationally is collapsing as women, suburbanites, and college-educated voters like me are walking from the party. We want something different.
I love that, and it goes to a great point. We know where those folks are breaking in early voting. We know where they're breaking in the polls. But in order for us to be successful, they've got to, those folks who haven't voted yet still have to get out there and make sure that their voice is heard and get their ballot cast. Robbie, it has been delightful to have you here
Jennifer,
today.
one
Thank
more.
you so much for joining.
I have just one more point I wanted to make.
Sure.
You know, there are presidents that have inspired us. From Lincoln to Monroe to Roosevelt to Kennedy, they gave hope to millions of people. And we need a leader. We need an intelligent leader. We want somebody who has reverence for our institutions of democracy. We need someone that understands the separation of powers, that understands that the Congress and the executive branch are co-equal partners in leading us, an independent judiciary where the AG is not like the executive's personal lawyer. He's the lawyer to the people. And
Right.
we need somebody that understands the laws of our land and the Constitution that this great country was founded on. And that's why I am supporting Joe Biden. And I would ask everyone in Arizona that is listening today to please join me.
That's terrific. And that's coming from somebody who was actually elected and served in office as a Republican.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Robbie.
Thank you.
So much for being with us. It has really been delightful.
It's been my pleasure.
And we appreciate you being here. And so now I want to bring you to some reminders for you. We know that there has been record early voting, record absentee ballots already cast this year. It's happening right now. And it makes me, I have to say, very happy. So many of you out there sharing your selfies with us. More than 64 million Americans have already cast their ballots, with voters in battleground states driving the incredible early turnout so far. This grid of all these photos that you've sent us, it's just beautiful. This is the cornerstone of our democracy, the people participating in a free and fair election. Keep them coming. Keep the pictures coming. You can tweet us a photo. Use the hashtag #VoteForAmericaSelfie, and we will feature your picture here on the show. We've seen some amazing stories come out of these pictures that you've been tweeting at us. We had a really cute one. I don't know if we're going to be able to show it to you. A woman who dressed up as Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg when she went to vote. She said, dressed as RBG, voted all blue in Texas. I love it. Keep sending them to us. Hashtag #VoteForAmericaSelfie. It's so important that every one of us get out there and make our voice heard in this election. Next up, we will be talking to the former chairman of the Delaware Republican Party and now a staunch Joe Biden supporter, Tom Ross. I'm looking forward to talking to him. But before that, we have a few messages for you from the Lincoln Project.
It sounds like a fairy tale. A man comes down from his tower and is crowned the most powerful man on earth. He gives to the rich and takes from the poor. He makes friends with our enemies and enemies of our friends. And then one day, a disease came upon the land. Fear not, he says, for it is a hoax and will not harm those who believe in me. As thousands and thousands suffer and die, he lies and says all will disappear with a sip of his magic potion. When the people cry for help, he attacks them with noxious gases and forces the children out of their homes and into the plague-filled air of a once proud and healthy nation. We're living in a story as grim as any ever told. And the lesson? Vote and send the man back to his tower for good.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
America is hurting. There's a sickness in the land, more than just a virus that could have been controlled long ago. Our faith is being tested. Our faith in each other, in the goodness of America. This is Joe Biden's moment. What his life prepared him for. Not an easy life, but being an American isn't about what's easy. It's about never giving up. He came from a family on hard times, overcame a crushing disability, endured the worst loss a man can imagine, and he never gave up. Joe Biden kept the faith that love is stronger than hate, that kindness is stronger than anger.
As I look across America today, hope seems elusive.
Today, it's not easy in America. Maybe it's destiny.
And my answer is this.
Maybe a higher power.
You and I are part of a covenant.
But once again, the right leader is here to bring us together.
If we do our part.
This is Joe Biden's moment.
If we stand together.
This is our moment.
Then the divisions of our time will give way.
This is America.
To the dreams of a brighter, better future. We can be what we are at our best. The United States of America.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
And welcome back to Vote for America on LPTV. I'm so happy to welcome our next guest to the show today. He is the former chairman of the Delaware Republican Party. He served on the Ethics Committee for the Republican National Committee, and he's a friend of mine. I'm really happy to have Tom Ross with us today. Tom, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here with you, Jennifer. Thanks for having me.
I'm really happy to have you here today. Let's just jump right into what we're here to talk about, which is, of course, this election and
Sure.
Donald Trump and Joe Biden. If we start by taking a step back, you and I were among the very few Republican leaders in 2016 who refused to put our name on Donald Trump's candidacy, who refused to endorse him. What was it in that moment at that time that kept you from being willing, as a former Republican Party chairman, from endorsing the party's nominee?
From the moment he came down the escalator, crazy racist attacks against Mexican immigrants, a history of grifting in his business. Rather, it was bankrupting small contractors that built his hotels and casinos in the Atlantic City. Someone that lacked the character and the decency to lead our great country. And, while I didn't support him in the election nor endorse him, when someone becomes your president, you want them to do well, because as good as they do is pretty much as good as the nation's going to do. And sadly, he's been an abject failure across the board. When I got into Republican politics, it was about hope, growth, and opportunity. And sadly, we've just seen it. The whole administration's largely been based on fear and hatred and incompetence. So it was a pretty easy decision for me to make, and I'm very confident I made the right one.
And you just said something, I haven't heard that phrase in a long time, and it almost hurts my heart a little bit. when you talk about Republicans being about hope, growth, and opportunity, because that's what we used to talk about when I was chairman all the time. That Republican ideals, when brought to leadership, can lift up the entire community. That we were a party that was supposed to be about
That's
reaching
right.
out and bringing people together. But it's not just the president who seems to have abandoned those Republican ideals. What has happened to those elected Republicans in Washington that people like you and I think, originally instinctively looked to and expected them to be the voice for what our party is supposed to be about?
It's been both shocking and heartbreaking. Folks that you know, folks that you supported, folks who you volunteered for.
Right.
It's just been astounding. And the silence has been deafening, whether it's, the good people on both sides comment, rather it's, playing footsies at best with white nationalism, um, the budget deficit blowing up, our failure to condemn bounties being placed on American soldiers. It has been shocking. And I guess the thing that's really mystifying is that there's so many Republicans that don't realize it's good politics to do the right thing. I mean, you're so fearful of a mean tweet, you're not going to call the president to task for failing to defend our soldiers in harm's way, or destroying the alliances that kept us out of a world war for 70 years now. It's just been shocking.
Right, and the party seems to have abandoned all those issues you listed that you and I campaigned for other people on those issues. I mean, that were always so important to us. The party's kind of gone silent in another area that I have found particularly disturbing during this election cycle. We know that the QAnon movement, the conspiracy theories that fuel that QAnon movement are really dangerous. And among other things, led to some people in Michigan thinking they were going to pull off some kind of a kidnap and secret trial of a sitting governor in the state of Michigan. And yet we had 18 Republicans who openly embraced the QAnon conspiracy theories running for federal office as Republicans, and not a sound, not a sound from party leadership. Is that
Jennifer, when you and
I feel particular. Go right ahead.
when you and I were in party leadership, we would actively weed those people out. If we
Right.
got wind that a candidate was a racist or a crazy conspiracy person, we would do our best to push them out, because if you can't run a party, how can you run a nation? And if you can't select and stand up for decency before someone's even in office, what are you going to do when they land in Washington?
And I guess I wonder sometimes, is that sort of craziness, it's the only way to talk about it, that has become so exposed in this cycle with Donald Trump running for reelection? Has that always been there? Where are the roots to that? Do we blame Trump for that? Is there something in the party that I just haven't recognized before now that
You know,
leads to this?
I hate to say it, but I think a lot of that raw anger was really whipped up in the 2010 Tea Party movement, where appealing to
Mhm.
people's better angels,
Yeah,
many in our
I
party
have one.
started
I have
appealing
one.
to their worst instincts. And quite frankly, um, I hate to say it, but I think there was a very big racial component to that as well, that you would have these fringe characters showing up at meetings screaming they wanted their country back. Well, just because an African American was president, no one had taken the country away. But there,
Right.
as a state chairman, we had a very fringe character running in a primary that was widely endorsed by the right wing talkers and Fox News and the professional right. And as a chairman, I felt an obligation to stand up to that person. I took some arrows for it, but I can tell you I slept well at night knowing I was doing the right thing. And I think for the last 10 years or so, there's been some cowardice, lack of leadership, and we haven't been able to mind our own party, let alone govern in an effective way.
I ran for Congress during the Tea Party movement, and you're right. It started as one thing and seemed to kind of be overtaken and go in a different direction very quickly. Now, Tom, you're not the only Republican in Delaware, which we know is Vice President Biden's home state. Has lived there, I don't know how long, raised his family there, served from there since he was 29, 30 years old. You are not the only Republican in Delaware who's decided to put their name and their vote behind Joe Biden. Talk to me a little bit about the Joe Biden you know, small state, political world, small world of politics there. Tell us about Joe Biden from your perspective.
Just a tremendous amount of decency and kindness, empathy. Kind of what you see on TV is what you get. Was very, very good friends with his late son and have a friendship with his other son as well. It's someone that can be a uniting force. It's someone that can pull the country together in this dark time and be the perfect antidote to, the darkness, the hate, the lies that we're currently being fed on a steady basis from this administration. I've said to some people, when you're politically active, sometimes you have the pleasure of working to defeat someone that's really bad. And other times you have the pleasure of working to elect someone that's really good. This is kind of a twofer. We need to turn the page on these past 4 years. And I think Joe Biden is uniquely positioned to bring us together, to get us back to values, the truth, the facts, the science. So I'm with him 110%. Look forward to seeing him win the election in about a week here.
And we hear more and more Republicans saying the same thing as we get closer and closer to the election. Before I leave you, Tom, I just want to touch base with you on how you're doing. I know, we've been talking a lot about COVID-19 and the pandemic on this show, and I know that you were diagnosed with it and you had a little bit of a struggle with it. I hope that you're doing as well as you look and sound today.
I'm doing great, thanks. The thing that really sticks with me when you ask me that question is I was one of the early folks to experience it. I got it in mid-March. And here we are 8 months later. And as a nation, we're in a much worse place simply because of lack of leadership, denying of medical facts, vilifying the doctors and Dr. Fauci and others, playing red state versus blue state with PPE. It is an absolutely disgrace that we find our nation in the state it is right now on the cusp of another huge wave of cases and tragedies and death and missed Thanksgivings and business devastation. In a nutshell, think about it. It's been 8 months since I had COVID, and absolutely nothing's been done to make the situation better.
We have two candidates, one of whom says, it's turning the corner, it's going to go away, it's going to disappear. And the other who says, we can't fix any of the problems that we face in this country until we get control of this pandemic, until we listen to the doctors and the scientists. And
in March, I was laying in bed when he was saying it was going to go away shortly. And quite frankly, look at where we are right now. It's spiking all over the country.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Tom. It's really a pleasure to have had you with us today.
Always great catching up.
Tom Ross, he's a former chairman of the Republican Party in Delaware, and he is now an avid Joe Biden supporter. So we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be back in just a few moments.
We have to have those conversations, as difficult as they are right now. I mean, the fate of the world really does depend on it. You don't actually change somebody's mind. What you do is to give them the opportunity to change their own mind. Start by not bulldozing ahead and attacking them. What happens as soon as you attack anybody is they dig in. And now they stop really listening to what they have to say. They aren't going to pay attention anymore, and they're going to solidify their position. You want to start with conversation. Then you want to put little landmines into that conversation. What you want to do is actually really engage with people to keep that conversation going. It's sort of like hostage negotiation, right? The longer I can keep you on the line, the more opportunities I have to say something that might actually have an influence. You have to actually frame it more as a conversation. We have to talk about this. I want to understand what it is that's driving you. You have to find the core values that somebody is operating with. We have lots of contradictory beliefs inside of us, but most of the time we don't have to confront them all at once.
America is founded upon the rule of law.
The president tweeting, "Liberate Michigan."
13 men now facing charges planning to kidnap and kill Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
I am your president of law and order.
It's all about people's values. You have to find the value that they have and the way that Trump contradicts that value. When you bring that contradiction to the fore, in the moment, that creates unease. And suddenly people go, holy cow, I can't believe that I supported him for this long. And that's one of the reasons why you often find that somebody is an ardent supporter for a long time, and then they shift into this other coherent framework. And I like to say we often bring data to a values fight. It's not about the data. One of the things that happens if you're a wonky kind of person, I'm a scientist, I love data, so you want to start trotting data out on your favorite topic. Data isn't going to do it. You're never going to get the satisfaction of having somebody say, you're right, I'm not going to vote for him. They're going to go home, they're going to sleep on it, they're going to wake up the next day, and then they're going to have that epiphany. There are going to be a certain number of the most diehard people who you're going to have a hard time convincing in the next 26 days. And the hardest thing that we're going to have is 3 or 4 years from now, avoiding having to say, I told you so.
And welcome back to Vote for America on LPTV. I am so happy to have our next guest with us. You have met him before. He's one of the smart guys behind the scenes here at the Lincoln Project, making it all happen. He's our political director, Zack Czajkowski. Zack, thank you so much for joining us today.
Jennifer, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
It is great to have you. I love that piece that we just showed on the break. Dr. Art Markman, a psychologist, giving us, the best advice on how to talk about the difficult issues surrounding this election with people that we love, that we care about. It's so much of what we've done on this show has been about how to persuade others to come out and support us in supporting Joe Biden. But this is kind of part of the game that you've been a big part of, Zack, on the political side, trying to convince people. You and I are going to talk a little bit today about misinformation, and let's just start with, you have this great line that you've used about grandma sharing, the Russian bots, the stories that are out there by the Russian bot.
Absolutely. I think there's some confusion over how disinformation gets shared. It's not always just bots putting it out into the universe. It's not always money behind it. Oftentimes, well-intentioned people They see a headline and they think, wow, that's crazy. I'm going to share that. I think a great example is in 2016, there was a fake article that said that the Pope had endorsed Donald Trump. Now, we all know that's not the case, but a lot of folks, they saw that, they shared it, and they were sharing it with very real people who were then sharing it with their networks as well. And so when you spot somebody who's a loved one or a friend who has put out something that is untrue or from Russia or a foreign actor, how do you have that conversation with them, Jennifer?
Right.
It's
That's absolutely the biggest struggle, especially people that we care about, that we respect, and they come to you with something, and you look at it and you think, "This is crazy," or "This should be so obvious." I love all those clues that Art Markman gave, and that
right.
to be respectful, to be kind, to find that place of agreement where you can start, to get to the core values. And what I've learned certainly through my lifetime is if I want to have a persuasive conversation with people, I always start with questions instead of statements or, attacking them. Asking them, what do you believe? Why do you believe it? Where did you get that? Where did you learn it? And I just think that always when we are respectful, we are more effective and more persuasive.
It's so true
So,
because if you come in hot and you just say, "Well, this is obviously crazy,"
right,
then somebody's just naturally going to shut down. But if you say, "Grandma, actually, are you sure that it sounds like the Pope
right,
has endorsed Donald Trump? That seems a little
right.
unlikely to me. How
Yeah.
reliable is that source of information? Where
Yeah.
did you get it from?"
Grandma, has the Pope ever endorsed a presidential candidate before? Can you remember? But I had those conversations with my mom and dad too. It's not always, the thing is that misinformation isn't always as obvious sounding as the Pope endorsed an American presidential candidate.
Absolutely, and I think it's important to admit, I personally have seen something and
Right.
believed it, and then found out shortly thereafter that it was entirely untrue. It's not always, a cheap trick. Sometimes it's very sophisticated, and there are a few steps that y'all can take to identify things that we're going to talk about shortly. But just know there's no shame in realizing that you've shared something that's untrue by accident.
Right.
Make sure you delete it. Make sure you tell folks, and make sure you own it.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in, and this is kind of when in my 30s and 40s, I used to watch Oprah Winfrey all the time, and one of the things that she would say is, "When you know better, you do better."
Right.
Right? I think that was a Maya Angelou thing. So I'm a big believer in deleting stuff. If I made a mistake, I delete it. I acknowledge it. And sometimes I'll say, "I posted this thing. I was wrong. Here's what the truth is," and you move on. So, but let's share with some people. There are kind of these five um, easy kind of basic steps to help yourself either spot misinformation or kind of how to kind of have a filter on how not to get taken in by it. And the first is just a simple one, and that's keep an eye on your emotions. If you see something online that elicits an immediate, strong emotional reaction, that should be your first clue to stop, think, read, figure it out. Because so often misinformation is intentionally worded and packaged in a way to elicit that strong emotional reaction from you, so that you then share it and pass it on. The
Yep.
next one is yours, right?
The next one
This
is
is
one that we
your
have all done,
yeah.
myself included. Don't like or share an article if you haven't read it. The headlines are oftentimes misleading. I think that Twitter is saying now, it actually says headlines are misleading, but truly, for the next couple days, make sure that y'all are reading everything that you're sharing thoroughly before you put it out there.
Yeah, so often if you go and read the article, it's written in a way that you'll get through the first paragraph or two, and you'll be like, "Oh, wait, this does not make any sense at all. This is not a news article." The next one, number three, is learn how to spot misinformation patterns, and this is kind of your neck of the woods,
There's a
Zach.
couple easy things. If you see an enormous amount of engagements very quickly within something was posted, that means that bots are amplifying it to try and tweak the algorithms to get people to share things. If you see that all of the folks commenting, they don't have pictures, they have misspellings, that gives you a good idea that it's coming from abroad. And so I think you can always tell also in the language. There are certain works about Russian writing that's a little different than ours, so you can see sometimes that there are trends. We can get into that a little bit longer later, but you can certainly see the patterns as they occur.
And the next one is don't fall for deep fakes or cheap fakes. I suspect that this cheap fake is one that I talked about on the air here a couple weeks ago, where there was a picture of Joe Biden at an event, a real picture of him at an event kneeling. He really was kneeling, but it got passed all over Facebook with the headline, Joe Biden knelt for the national anthem. Can you believe this is the guy that they want us to elect? And of course, a simple Google search revealed that there was no national anthem playing. It was a whole different story. But what are the deep fakes and the cheap fakes that people should be looking for?
I think one thing that we'll see all the time is if you look at Instagram, there are filters, right? You can make yourself look a little more tan, a little more fit. You can do the same thing to make somebody look worse. You can cut together clips of unrelated interviews to have it seem like Joe Biden or someone is saying something that they did not. So make sure that you are watching the full clips before you share. The context is oftentimes relevant. I think you'll see it in every political attack I'd ever, things that are taken out of context, things that
Right.
are the least charitable depiction.
Right.
We will see many of those videos coming forward.
And it's I like this last one, number 5. Be skeptical, not cynical. And I like that because I do worry that all the years that I've spent in politics, I've become sort of jaded. But I would like to think that a little bit of skepticism is a good thing. So how do people know, Jack, what to be skeptical of, or what are some of the triggers that people should, when they see something, be able to say, okay, this is something I should look at more closely.
Absolutely. I think if it's not from a well-known news source, that's always a red flag. I think it's important, even if it is from a well-known news source, to be fact checking yourself before you put it out there to the world. And I think misleading headlines certainly are a good giveaway.
I love your point about credible news sources. There are millions now of fake news sites that look and sound like a real one, and they take pieces of real news websites or news shows, and they put it into this fake site. And then, so what I have learned to do is, if I see something like that, I will Google and say, "Is XYZ website credible?" If you just Google that, or is it legitimate? And when it's not, it's immediately obvious, and they'll show examples, they'll show ratings, they'll show fact check, everything. So if you're looking at a website that you're not familiar with, or sounds like, gee, that sort of sounds right but not quite, Google is a powerful
And
tool.
absolutely. And if you've got a group chat with friends who are politically inclined, send it to them and say, "Does this feel right
Right.
to you all? It seems kind of off to me."
Right.
We all have to make sure we're checking ourselves.
Right, right. And that goes back to what you said at the very beginning. We can't be afraid to question ourselves, or to acknowledge if we made a mistake, or if we got pulled in by something that seemed legitimate and it turns out that it's not. So, Zach, something that you've really been a big part of here at the Lincoln Project, and we've talked about it on the air a couple times, is this CSAY 2020, which is this great organization that we're partnering with. There's been so much concern about voter intimidation, about voter suppression, about fraud taking place in this cycle. And CSAY 2020 is this great operation that you can use in the moment if you see something. And what I want to emphasize before I pass it over to you is that this only works if millions of Americans engage. So go to csay2020.com. If you haven't voted yet, go before you vote so that you can figure out how to use it, share it with your family and friends, put it on your Facebook page. It's a really powerful tool if we all engage. You are better positioned to explain to folks how it works and what to do with it.
Absolutely. And I think before we walk through the tool, there are many faces of voter suppression. There's lots of different ways to prevent people from making their voices heard. It can be long lines. It can be somebody blocking the entrance to a precinct. It can be somebody open carrying to make folks uncomfortable. It can be saying polls are closed as the polls close, and not telling people who are already in line they can remain in line because they were already there in time. And so those are a few of the different things that we are going to see. But let's walk y'all through what the form looks like. It's super simple and easy. The first thing that you're going to do with CSAY is you're going to select the type of incident. So if we can pull up the form, there we go. Select the type of incident. Now, it's always important to get as accurate as possible. So there's a section for y'all to write a quick description of what happened, what you saw. It's important that you include then your location, the time, and the date. That's because if we need to send attorneys to you, if we need to call local authorities, if we just need to send over food and water for long lines, want to make sure we get it to the right place in a quick manner. And then next, if you have a photo or a video, it's always helpful to have additional evidence. There are going to be unfortunately, some trolls that are going to submit fake reports. So the more that y'all can give, the more likely we are to be able to respond quickly or get it to the right folks. And then after that, all you have to do is submit. And this is going to allow you voting officials and the media to see what's happening so it can be corrected. We have a decent number of reports coming in. In most of these instances, they are accidents. They're human error. It's long lines. It's somebody who's passing out flyers a little closer to the precinct than they're allowed to. There have been a few serious incidents, but we sincerely hope that y'all will never have to use CSA, but we want to make sure that you're aware of it. And this is the best of America. We are crowdsourcing a more safe and fair election, and I think that's a beautiful thing, and we hope that y'all will be part of the solution here.
I love this. This is so important, and it's the kind of thing that everybody in our country can come together and be part of making it a better process, making it a better, more trustworthy uh, uh, process and cycle that we do as we go through the election this year. And Zach, you're going to stay with us today, right? And
Yes,
share
ma'am.
bring us some of the questions and comments from our audience.
I did something a little crazy. I posted on Twitter to see if anybody had any questions for us, and a few folks have written in.
Great.
So Jamie in Florida would like to know, Jennifer, can someone please tell me if these signs are allowed outside of a polling location? It's a great question.
It is a great question because you see them everywhere at this time of year in people's yards, on the highways alongside in public areas. And the truth is, they are allowed outside of polling areas if they are far enough away. There is a certain distance, and it probably differs state to state exactly how far. I believe in New Hampshire it's either 25 feet or 50 feet, but they have to be a certain distance away because those signs are not supposed to be making you feel intimidated or influenced or like someone's kind of getting in your face as you're trying to go in and vote. So those signs are allowed. You'll always see them near polling places, but there is a certain distance back that they have to be kept. And if you think that they're too close, if you know what the distance is, or your experience is just that you feel like they're too close, you can point it out to the folks working inside, and they'll go out and take a peek at it and either take them down or make somebody move them.
Awesome. We got another question from a viewer named Mike. Mike says, I've been hearing that states can stop counting results on election night. Can you expand on what would cause this and if they will be counted fully eventually?
Yeah, this is part of what the president has been feeding the Donald Trump's personal misinformation campaign on voter fraud and election processes in our country. No, they can't. They don't have permission to stop counting on election night. Every vote that is legally cast is to be counted in every precinct, in every district, in every state. What some of this is going toward what the president knows is that there has been a record number of absentee ballot and early voting ballots cast. He also knows what we know, which is that in most cases they are probably overwhelmingly benefiting Joe Biden. And 33 states do not begin counting their absentee ballots until election night and then in the days that follow. So if the president can convince you that any ballot that isn't counted by election night must be somehow fraudulent or out of order, then he can convince you that the ultimate results are not to be trusted. That's what that is all about. Every legally cast ballot should, and if we have anything to say about it, will be counted. And your state is not done counting ballots until your Secretary of State has certified the outcome. It's not Donald Trump going on the air on November 4th saying, okay, the election was yesterday. If we haven't counted them yet, they don't count. That's not how it works. When your Secretary of State says that your state is certified, then you know that the outcome is correct.
That's fantastic. And absolutely every vote will be counted. Jeffrey from California would like to know, is there a magic number of early votes, either nationally or statewide, that would make you more optimistic about a win?
No, there is no magic number. There is no magic number. And this is my biggest fear, is that the absentee ballots and the early voting has been so overwhelming. Like truly at record levels, people are participating in this election so far. And all the speculation so far is that those votes are benefiting Joe Biden. And even some of the the exit polling and things like that, it seems to be benefiting Joe Biden. There is no number that's going to make me feel comfortable until every single human being in this country has voted, and every one of those votes has been counted, and the Electoral College has properly accounted for those votes. and Joe Biden is sworn in on January 20th of next year, that's when I will feel confident that the worst is behind us and a new, brighter future for our country is within our grasp.
I could not agree more with every
Good.
single word of that.
Good.
So
do not take your foot off the, you pedal to the metal all the way across the finish line.
yes, indeed. And then, so Jason would like to know, how big of an impact will the SCOTUS decision on the Wisconsin mail-in ballots affect the vote in Wisconsin?
Yeah, this is a crazy one. How big of an impact will the SCOTUS decision in Wisconsin, the mail-in ballots? I have to get my head in the game on this one. It could theoretically have an impact on it, which is why it is so important that if you live in Wisconsin and you have an absentee ballot sitting on your kitchen counter, either drive it to a drop-off box or walk yourself down to the end of the driveway and mail it right this minute. Because in Wisconsin, any ballot that is not received by Election Day will not be counted. And that's always been the rule. It's always been the law in Wisconsin. But it has been upheld now by the Supreme Court. So it's not about getting it postmarked by Election Day. It must be received. And there are ballot drop-off boxes all over the great state of Wisconsin. And you can find out which one is closest to you by going to vote.org. They are all listed there. And if you're in Wisconsin and you want your vote counted, today, get it out there. And I believe, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, Zach, I believe you can also deliver it in person, correct?
Yes, indeed. And so vote.org has a really incredible tool. It's a Dropbox locator, and it'll show you all the places you can drop off your ballot. As we are now so close to the election, just would highly, highly recommend that if y'all are in a state where you're able to drop it off, that you do that rather than take your chances with the Postal Service. So let's make sure we get all those ballots in so we can beat this guy and a whole bunch of his enablers.
And a whole bunch of his, and Trump and Trumpism.
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
what this is all about. Zach, you have been fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you
It's
were with
always
us today.
fun.
I always enjoy having you
Can I
with me.
plug something really quickly?
Of course you can.
I'm wearing my Lincoln Project fleece here. There we go. Highly recommend that y'all check out our gear store. The likelihood of it getting there before the election is a little bit slim because we're so close, but you know that you want to get one of these.
Well, and the Lincoln Project is not going away after Election Day. So this is a great opportunity. You're killing me. Can I plug something? That's good for you.
I had to do it for Philip, the king of gear.
Oh, do it for, well, you know what? I love Philip, so I'm okay with that. Okay. I'm okay with that. So let's do a couple more quick reminders, folks. There is a registration deadline that we don't want you to miss today. If you live in the state of Connecticut, this is it. If you want to get registered to vote, this is it. Today's the day, and the day it's late in the day. So let's get out there and take care of that. If you do not register, you cannot vote. You can go to vote.org if you're in Connecticut and want to know where and how to get registered today. But that's the last reminder I have for you today. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and of course, especially our guest, Zack Czajkowski, the political director here at the Lincoln Project, and Robbie Shaw, a former state rep in Arizona, Republican, who is voting for Joe Biden, and of course, my friend and former chairman of the Delaware Republican Party, Tom Ross. And as we said yesterday, we're taking our time, some time this week, to make the closing argument, just like the candidates and the campaigns do. They get into that last week before Election Day, and they make their closing argument for all those folks out there who are still trying to just make that decision about which way to go. And the Lincoln Project just released a new ad today called The Last Call. And I feel like that ad makes the argument. We're talking about the coronavirus and the pandemic today. I just felt like this ad made the argument better than I ever could.
I put the phone on speaker so she can hear you.
What do you think?
She's in and out. Your girls are on the telephone, Joyce. Joyce? You can say something. She can hear you now.
Hi, Mom. Hey, Mom. How are you doing?
The girls say hi, Joyce. Your mom moved her fingers like she's waving.
I wish we could be there with you, Mom.
They say they want to be here with you, Joyce.
She knows that we can't, right?
They can't because of the COVID. Joyce. Yes, she knows. Yes, she does. She nodded.
We love you, Mom.
Love you, Mom. Your girls love you, Joyce. She nodded again a little.
Bye, Mom.
They say goodbye, Joyce.
On November 3rd, vote Biden-Harris. Life's too important not to.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
I'm sorry. I was able to be with my mom when she passed away. I was sitting next to her holding her hand. So many people in our country are carrying an unbearable pain that didn't have to be. It did not have to be this way. It didn't have to be this great a loss. It didn't have to be this painful. So the closing argument today from me is to please join me in voting for the man who actually cares about you and your family and the safety and health and well-being of our nation. Let's stand together on Election Day and vote for Joe Biden. Thank you so much for being with us today. I look forward to seeing you back tomorrow at 2:30 Eastern Time, at 11:30 Pacific Time, right here on Vote for America on LPTV.
This is America, and it's hurting. Right now, we're getting knocked down by the very people who should be lifting us up. Our families and our neighbors are sick, and we're being lied to. They want to scare us into believing it has to be this way. It doesn't. In the past, when change was needed, we've stepped up. Now, it's time to step up again. This moment is not about Democrat or Republican. It's about being on the right side of history. We must set aside our differences, stand together, united, and ask, what can I do to help? It's time to put people ahead of politics, to put country over party. It's time to vote for America.
Hello, my name's Matt. I'm from Indianapolis. People need to know, if you turn over the bucks, they really think they're winning and going to win this election. So we need not to let up at all. We've got to really push this to the end.
The peaceful transfer of power is a uniquely American invention. Is that right?
Absolutely, it is. And there was no such thing as a president before George Washington became one. There was considerable debate about what do you call the president of the United States. And, George Washington settled on the simple Mr. President that carries forward to this day. But the idea that people were capable of governing themselves was a heretical notion.
Yeah.
It was astoundingly radical in this moment of history when all of this comes to life. And the ideas and the ideals in the founding documents of the country we now understand are for everybody. And what Trump is talking about is so profoundly un-American. To hear these words coming from an American president, putting doubt into the electorate about whether he will go if he's defeated.
I have already voted by mail and checked, made sure that they received mine. This is the first year I've ever voted a straight ticket, which is blue. I made the mistake of voting for Trump last time because I could not make myself vote for Hillary. I realize that's a mistake now. And I have just been appalled. As a retired ICU ER nurse, I am appalled the way he has not only behaved, but the way that he's made no really attempt to control the coronavirus.